look at some of the aspects of OpenACC. And this tutorial has 3 problems. The first problem is just to get you started with OpenACC and see how to compile and run OpenACC program. So we are given this particular problem where there are a few printfs and we have added just some parallel constructs to it. Okay, I have one question. So you need to compile and run this program with this particular a.out10 as a parameter, which decides the number of gangs, or in this case, in particular, number of threads with which the code is going to run. So may I ask how many of you have been able to compile any OpenACC program? Can somebody suggest if they have succeeded in compiling OpenACC programs? Need not be this one, just any. Okay, so there is a good silence. Okay, so I think I understand that you guys are busy with other parts of the course as well as other courses, but it's probably a good idea to get started with at least compiling some basic programs so that that gets out of your way when it's time to do the assignment, etc. Okay, so what I'll do is I'm anyway planning to show what is the output of this code, etc. The third problem is the one that you will have to try on your own. But in the process, I'll also show you how to execute it on Aqua. All right, so let me just log into Aqua. I hope the screen is visible. And so this is the code that is given as problem number 1. Can somebody confirm that you are able to see the code properly and the font size is appropriate?
Yes, sir, I can.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So this is our .c file which has this code, and then for submission we need this sort of this sort of a file which needs to be submitted, where there are certain PBS related commands. This script is also shared. There are some shell related commands which you can ignore. You just need to copy and never change those parts. This module load is one which you need to have, and then this is the one which needs to be using as the compiler, right? So we have the PGCC compiler in this particular path. -ACC means that we are generating the accelerator code, and -minfo is going to give us additional information from the compiler, whether it was able to parallelize, whether it did some copying here and there, etc. So this is my program, and then I'm collecting the output in an output file. You can ignore this for this tutorial, but this is going to give you some additional profiling information about the program, which I have covered in yesterday's lecture. And then we run the code with ./a.out10, which again goes to the output and so on. So this is our basic setup. So the compilation as well as the execution is happening from the script. You can as well compile locally, but that is not suggested because the head node will probably get occupied with the compilation. So we push the compilation also onto the client node. All right. So once we have this script, we submit this as qsub. That is the file name, and it returns this particular number, which is going to be the job number, which is the first 6 digits are the job number of your job, right? So I'm just going to see if that job is over. It's a small job, so most probably it is over. And if it is over, it will create this directory as well as it has generated this output. So what is the output that it generated is that this is because of the -m info. Then there are 10 hello worlds, 10 bye worlds, then host, and then second pragma. So if we look at our PDF, we had 10 hello worlds, 10 bye worlds, then the host, and then the second pragma. Why doesn't it happen that some hello worlds are intermixed with some bye worlds? That won't happen in this case because the number is 10. If it is a large number, then there is a possibility that hello world of one thread might interleave with the bye world of the other thread. As far as host is concerned, that does get printed at the end of this pragma because there is an implicit barrier, and then that is getting printed anyway on the host, and after that the second pragma is going to get printed after host gets printed exactly once, right? And the second pragma gets printed 10 divided by 2 number of times. So if I, for example, change this this pragma, the first pragma, to async, let's actually try that. For example, if I add async here, then we expect, okay, what do we expect if I add async there? What will be the change in the output?
It's possible that host is printed above everything else and could have bye above hello and so on.
Sure. So it's possible that because of this async, this barrier at the end of this pragma construct is not there, and therefore host might get printed a priori, because the host is going to now not wait for hellos and byes to be done. So let's confirm that quickly. Note that I didn't have to compile it. It's going to be done by the script, and 197.504 output. That does happen, that host does get printed before hello and bye, right? It's possible that it might get printed somewhere in between. That is also possible depending upon the speed of CPU and GPU. For example, if you add some wait before the printf, let's say some sleep and something, then it's possible that it might get interleaved and so on. So all of this is what I would like you to try out, experiment with, so that you understand the basic aspects of OpenACC, how to run the codes, etc. Any questions on the first question?
Yes, sir. So firstly, is there a way to install the PGCC compiler on my own laptop rather than using the cluster?
Okay, I think it is possible, although I have not tried it. But okay, so whether PGCC is proprietary, that is the question. I mean, whether it is a paid version, but considering that this is NVHPC version, I suppose there should be some version which is possible to be available online for installation on laptops. Did you find that it is not available, or it's always paid?
I looked it up and I found that, oh, all right, I did not know this. So when I looked up, it said there's a PGI computing group which is offering the compiler, but that is licensed. So
that is correct, yes. So this NVHPC is likely to be free, so that should be possible to be used. But otherwise, yeah, I think it might be okay if you want to use the Aqua cluster otherwise.
Okay, yes, sir. And also, you mentioned something in the lecture about how even though we have async removing a barrier, the second section is executing separately or after. I didn't quite follow that. So could you repeat it?
Yeah, I'll mention that. So the question here is that Raghav, right? So Raghav is asking, is that although this part, the first pragma part is, although we have added asynchronous, let me go to the code. Although we have added asynchronous there, I have mentioned somewhere in my lecture that this second pragma is not going to start unless all the threads corresponding to the first part are over, right? So this is, for this we need to understand a little bit about how the GPU computation is going to be working for such a setup. So the compiler is going to generate something called as a device function or a kernel for this code, and this is going to be executed by multiple threads on the GPU. Now, it so happens that this part, this kernel that we are calling, this and okay, and for the second printf also there will be a kernel which will get generated automatically. Now these two kernels are by default executed sequentially by the device. What does that mean? So to go into the little details, there is something called as a queue, an execution queue or a command queue, which inserts these kernels into that, which executes, so the driver, the CUDA driver is going to insert those kernels into this execution or command queue, and then the at runtime the kernels are going to be dequeued from this queue and then executed. And until the previous kernel is completely over, from the same queue you cannot execute the other kernel. There are ways, at least in CUDA, and I'm sure that must be there here also, but I have not come across this, that you can push different kernels in different queues, and therefore these are going to be executed simultaneously on the same GPU. So that is possible. So it's almost like if you have two functions in CPU, those are running simultaneously, right? So that doesn't happen. So I'll probably leave it at that they are going into in a queued order, and therefore they are always executed one after the other. So for almost all the parts that we are going to see in this course, there is always going to be one after the other execution on the device.
Thank you, sir.
No problem. Venu has a question here. We are asking for creation of 10 gangs, but are all the 10 threads still part of the same warp? Yeah, so it turns out to be the case, and that's the reason why we see all these hellos printed together and then the buys printed together. So what Venu is asking is about the vector lanes. So there is that is called as a warp. 32 threads together form a warp, and they are always executing in single instruction multiple data format. And that's the reason why you will see that hellos and buys are never interleaved when the number of threads is 10. But when you increase the number of threads, there is a good chance that you will see some interleaving happening across the two. Right? So there is some hope for that. Kishore Ram Sathya is asking, I think there is a free community edition for Linux, but not for Windows. I see. So I think this is with respect to Raghav's question about whether there is a compiler available. So thanks, Kishore, for that. When you are saying if it's going this, why not just ask for num underscore threads other than num underscore?
We'll give the number of threads and it will automatically decide the number of gangs, etc. Here we specifically ask for 10 gangs, and gangs are supposed to be analogous to
thread blocks. Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. No, I actually, I must say that I didn't want to get into too many details related to this thread blocks and warps and so on. The reason being that controlling that turns out to be a little more involved. Although in the context of GPU programming, which Venu was part of earlier, it's something which we have to start with, and therefore I have just left it as number of gangs. But yeah, you are right that it's probably better to mark it as number of threads rather than number of gangs, so that then automatically the number of gangs, etc., can be decided based on. Yeah, I think that's a valid point. So let's take Venu's suggestion, and we could specify number of threads rather than number of gangs in our programs. I think that's still better.
Sir, I have a doubt.
You go ahead.
Okay, sir.
So we have a data race there. Okay, Gaurav has got the lock. Yeah, Gaurav, go ahead.
Sir, this print of host, sir. So can we say that the host is being printed by the CPU and the part which is parallelized with Pragma ACC is being printed by the GPU?
Yes, that we can say in this case. It so happens that the way we have written the program, it will always happen that host is always going to get printed by the CPU, and hello bye are going to be printed by the GPU as well as second pragma. But there exist situations where not in the parallel part, but in the kernel's part, where the compiler is going to decide which part is going to run on host and which on the device. So in this case, thankfully, there is no confusion. It's all deterministic who is going to execute what. But if all of this I would have put in instead of the pragma SEC parallel, if I would have put in a kernel's clause, then it's not clear who is going to print what. And that's the reason why you might have seen in the lecture also, we get different outputs depending upon how the variables and the data dependencies are.
Okay, so we can say that we can control it using this pragma ACC, whereas kernel won't be able to control that.
That is correct. Yes, kernels, it's more like suggestive, as they call it. So I'm going to suggest to the compiler that go try to parallelize this code as much as possible. Whereas the parallel pragma is going to be prescriptive. I'm going to prescribe that this must run on the GPU. The compiler can decide that, oh, this does not have enough parallelism, let me run it with fewer threads. That is possible, unless we have specified the number of gangs or number of threads. But yeah, by and as far as the code is concerned, it is always going to run on the GPU if we have the parallel pragma.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Venu, you are locked.
Sir, I was asking whether the ordering between those two kernels will still remain if we compile for multi-core target.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I think I saw your question on the chat box now. So if we compile it for the multi-core, will the ordering across the two kernels stay? Okay, so I'm going to recall what we had in case of OpenMP, where whenever we had async, then is there a possibility that the faster thread will start executing the other one? I think that didn't happen, right? If I recall correctly, I think you had this question during the OpenMP days also. I think that it doesn't happen that the faster thread goes ahead and does that. I think they still wait for each other at the start of the next pragma. So in that case, I would believe that it will not print it still, even on the multi-core. Does that seem reasonable, or Venu, you had a different observation earlier?
No, the previous observation was for hash pragma OMP4.
Yes,
but
with async.
No, without async. Without no wait.
No, with async, that's okay. I mean, without async, it is okay. But with async, if I had two for loops, then the second for loop will not start execution. Some thread will not start execution, right? Even if one thread finishes from the previous for loop.
Okay, I have to go back and check. So what I remember is, if the OMP4 does not have the no wait clause.
No wait, not async. Yeah.
Then at the end of the OMP4, there is an implicit barrier. At the starting, there is nothing.
Oh, at the starting, there isn't anything. Yeah, but I am not sure if the other thread starts executing. Okay, but if that barrier doesn't exist at the start of the pragma, then it's possible that some faster thread will start executing the second for loop some iteration. Right? This is going to be your observation for OpenMP. Yeah, I don't know what is going to be here. It needs to be tried, but whatever is our observation with respect to OpenMP, that is likely to continue here. The reason being that OpenMP internally can get implemented using, let's say, pthreads, and similar backend might get used by the multi-core target of OpenACC as well. So there is a possibility that they will match. Yeah, but I have not tried it. That needs to be checked.
So one more question, sir.
Yeah.
While this the program encounters this hash pragma ACC, and then the this whole block goes into the GPU. So can we say that there is a same phenomena happening like OMP forking and joining kind of thing there?
Yes, you can view it very similar to forking and joining. That is correct. It's just that on CPU during OpenMP, that forking in joining is happening on the same device, I mean same host, whereas this is getting taken care of more on the other device, right? So the host can now either freely go ahead with other executions, or it needs to wait until all the threads have joined on the GPU.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So I think it's a valid way to think about it, that there is a forking and joining happening on the GPU. That's fine. All right. So if there are no further questions, we'll move to question number 2, which is to identify errors in this program, right? So there is a small program fragment I have given. This is the kind of code that we write when we are writing sequential code. I want to find some number or some search string or some key into an array, right? So here I am assuming that all of these are integers. So numbers of I, if that is equal to mera number, then I break. And at the end of the loop, sequentially, I check if I have reached the end of the loop or not. And depending upon that, I say whether the number is found or not. So before getting into the parallelism, that is the ACC part, does anybody see any errors in this code in the sequential setting? Okay.
Sir,
Nobody?
I think that break we cannot use in structured block.
Okay, good. So that is definitely one problem in this code, because the break is not allowed. I mean, the break is correct in the sequential part when this pragma doesn't exist. But we have said that in our slides that you cannot enter and exit arbitrarily in the middle of the structured block. Right? So, and break is one definite way to exit the block. So this should not be allowed. Okay. Any other?
So are we going to compile it on C compiler?
Yes, we will compile it on C. Why?
Because then we cannot define the the loop variable inside the for.
Correct. So that is another issue, that I have specified int ii in the for loop, whereas I am using ii outside. So that will also not compile. Good. That is the second problem. There is also a third problem. Okay. Okay, so the third problem is in the condition that ii not equal to n should actually be ii equal to n. Only when you reach n, then the number is not found. All right, so these are the issues that come up, and we would like to fix them as much as possible. So let's look at that code, which I think I have. So let's say that n is initialized to 1000. I have some numbers of n, and I initialize these using some code where I just say some random number mod 100 and I initialize it. And then we have this code which uses break, and as you can see, int ii needs to be outside, and if ii equals n, then number not found, otherwise it's okay, right? So this is a completely sequential code. There is nothing related to PGCC here. So if I try to compile and run this code, so it finds it somewhere, right? So I can run it multiple number of times and it finds somewhere. So all of this happens. So sequentially this is likely to be reasonable code, because Mera number I have added as always taken as numbers of n by 2. So definitely it is there inside the array. Or I can specify Mera number as -1, which is guaranteed to be not there in the array. And I can just quickly check if that works out fine, and every time the number is not found. So that is likely that the code is working fine, but you can check for correctness in case you find any issues. Okay, so sequentially this is okay. Now let's try to compile this using PGCC. And as Gaurav was suggesting, maybe there is some small issue here because the structured block should not allow me to compile it. So, okay, job 197517. Okay, number not found. That does mean that it compiled fine, right? So then there is no problem. So what I'm saying is that in that submit PBS, we had the compilation, and that compilation happened and there is no error and it's giving the output, right? Doesn't that mean that in the structured block break is allowed? Any suggestions on that? Okay. So you should not forget that part. So what Venu is suggesting here, that we didn't add any pragma there. It's a completely sequential code, right? So therefore we should be careful about that part. Let's add the pragma. So I have added this pragma now, right? SEC parallel loop, and here instead of, let me add break here, because otherwise it will not allow me to give that error. So let's see if that works out. Sorry, in the submission script I need to change that to 2 pair. Okay, job 197520 output. Okay, so now I get the error that branching into or out of the parallel region is not allowed. Yeah, that makes sense, and I should definitely fix that. Okay, fine. So let me fix that. So what I'm currently doing is just printing it directly there as soon as I find it, because this is all happening in parallel. So I cannot really break out in between. So let's see. So does that find it? Currently Mera number is numbers of n by 2, and so it is definitely present inside the queue, inside the array. 21. Yeah, and as you can see, the output has changed suddenly. It's giving multiple outputs. Why is that?
It's finding that number in multiple locations in the array.
So sequentially we were able to break in between as soon as we found the first occurrence, but now it is it's happening in parallel. So it's possible that different threads will find it and they will just print it, right? We are not able to exit at the first output. There are ways in which we'll be able to do, but it's not guaranteed whether it is going to be the first one or not. If at all you want, you can do further jugglery to make sure that the smallest one is chosen. For example, we had the atomics in case of OpenMP where we could choose the minimum using the atomics. But anyway, that is anyway going to reduce the parallelism. In that case also it is probably better to run it sequentially, but this was more to get you going with respect to some of the basic aspects of when we convert it from sequential to parallel, what small issues can arise. Right? So I just wanted to get you started with this. So please try this out also. But there is one small query which I have not addressed in the chat box, that is Krishna Vamsi's query, plus plus I will skip the first element. So that is the sequential code. That should not happen, right? So whether we give plus plus I here or plus plus II or II plus plus, it should still give the correct answer because that anyway is going to execute it after the loop is executed. So it should be all right. Okay. Any other concerns, questions on this second part? So although I am showing this actual execution, I think it's expected that all of you try that out and face some issues and in the process learn. Okay, so I'll move to the third problem then. This is a actual problem that is a tutorial problem. So we want to implement a stencil computation. And the stencil computation essentially means that we have, let's say, 1D, 2D, 3D array, some k-dimensional array, and we are computing the value in the next iteration from whatever is the value computed in the previous iteration. So the stencil in this case is going to be relatively simple, where I have Aij, which is getting computed for each of the entries in this case it's a 2D matrix, from I minus 1th row and jth element, and I minus 1th row and j plus 1th element. Right? So you can see that if there is ij element, then whatever is the element just above it in the matrix and whatever is the element just above and right to it is going to be required to compute the value of Aij, right? Along with itself. It also needs its own value because this is plus equal to. So I'm assuming that the array indices are growing from top to bottom. So this is a common requirement in several applications, this stencil computation. It could be heat wave related equations, or it could be related to graphics and so on. So we can assume for now that it's n cross m dimensional matrix, which means that it need not be square matrix. And we are probably running it, let's say, for 10 iterations. Right? So since we are talking about previous row and next column, this is not defined for I equal to 0 and j equal to n minus 1, right? Or j equal to m minus 1. Right? So we can take care of that boundary, the upper row and the last column. So you can ignore that for these two cases. So we can fill in this matrix with some random numbers and also test it with the initial values of all ones in all the cells. All the n cross m cells are all ones, and you can imagine how the numbers are going to change, and that will help you debug or at least understand that for basic simple inputs it is working fine. And you can try it first for square matrix, and then you can possibly modify it to make sure that it is working for rectangular matrices also. Right? So once you have this basic setup, then the question is, we would like to write a sequential program for updating the matrix A in situ, which means that we are reading the matrix and writing to the same matrix. Then we parallelize this just by adding some OpenACC pragmas. Right? So we time the sequential part here, then we time the parallel part, and the third one is the second one was parallelization of only the initialization, where I am using possibly the random function, or you can have your own function, doesn't matter. And then the third part is parallelizing both the initialization as well as the stencil computation, and see how the three timings compare with each other. We do expect that the timings go on reducing, but does that really happen? That you have to figure out, right? Especially for this n equal to 256, m equal to 256. If that works out correctly, you can as well try it for larger matrices, depending upon the amount of memory that you have on the machine. Any questions on part A? Okay, so let's come to the part B. Now what we want to do is, because of this addition of pragmas in part A, there was some communication happening between CPU and GPU. So some data was required in matrix A, which was copied to the GPU and possibly back. In such cases, we might be able to perform some optimization with respect to the data handling. For example, if matrix A is getting copied from GPU to CPU after each iteration, well, that is unnecessary, because all the 10 iterations or whatever is the number of iterations, all of those are happening on the GPU. There is no data requirement for matrix A on the CPU. So you need not copy it back after every kernel is over, after every ACC parallel loop is over. So this you need to optimize using the data construct. Right? So data constructs we studied in the yesterday's class. So please try that and again measure the time and see if that is improving the execution further. So it's not only the execution time that you should watch out for, it's also the compilation output that you should check that is actually reducing the copy out clauses. And as well, you can profile the code using that PGI ACC time, right? So that I think I didn't mention, but I'll just quickly show that. Right, so this export PGI ACC time, you just set it to 1 and it will show you, start showing you some profiling output. And you just set it to 0 and that should be okay. You will not get that profiling output. Right, so any questions on part A and B? Okay, so let's come to the part C. Now I'm relaxing the requirement that it should be the same matrix A, which is used for both reading and writing, which means that you can read from one matrix and write to the other. Is it possible to improve the parallelism in this case? Any suggestions?
Yes, sir. I think we can increase the parallelism.
Sorry, I didn't hear Raghav.
I think we can increase the parallelism.
Could you suggest how?
If we use like alternate arrays for each iteration, then as in we use an A and then we use it to update B, and then we use B to update A. In that sense, if we do it, we can do it completely independently. The computation of B using A and A using B. Right.
So we can exchange the roles of A and B as input array and output array, and that will give you more parallelism, because yeah, as Venu has also pointed out in the chat box earlier, because of this dependence, right? So there was a dependence on the previous row, and then yeah, essentially the previous row, and therefore you can compute only the next row's elements. Next to next row's elements you won't be able to do, because for that because there is going to be a data race while you are reading from ij and writing to ij for the current let's say step. So if you have a separate array, then all of A becomes read only, and then you can read arbitrary values from multiple places. So therefore the parallelism is not restricted to a particular row, but you can have it across, you can have parallelism across all rows, which means essentially all the m cross n matrix, if you have enough threads on the GPU, you'll be able to compute it in one step from A to B in one iteration, right? So that is the amount of parallelism that you might be able to achieve with this. So it's expected that if on GPUs you can have large number of threads, and therefore you will be able to gain in parallelism. There are other advantages of doing this. For example, even there are advantages with respect to how the memory gets accessed by different threads. So that will also improve the execution time, and you will see large benefits. So please try this out, and please discuss if there are any concerns, questions about this. So more or less that is what I wanted to cover with respect to these tutorials. Any questions on any parts of the tutorial? Okay, if there are no questions, then are there any questions on any of the lecture material that we have shared either on OpenACC or on MPI or OpenMP?
So I have a question about MPI, the last MPI lecture.
Yeah, I think Kameshwar, I think you will have to answer this.
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Sir, in the last lecture, when you were writing the pseudocode for the Gaussian elimination, at some point you mentioned that we had to make a distinction for global index versus local index between Fortran and C. You said you can't do something in C, whereas you can in Fortran. I didn't understand that. Could you explain that a bit? You can hear me, right?
Yeah, you are audible. I think Kameshwar had some issue with the mic. I think he will be back. Let's wait.
Yeah, just a second. Yeah, so we had my son was trying to answer the question, so that's why I had to put him outside the room. Yeah, okay. So can you repeat the question, please? So it was the global indexing versus the local indexing. Yeah, so what I said was, I think the algorithm, I used a global indexing, right? Because if you have a number of rows going from, let's say, 1 to 20, 21 to 40, and so on, so I use the global indexing. Whereas that you can use in Fortran. For example, if you want to allocate an array which has 20 elements, but you wanted to start from, let's say, 20 to 40, you could do that in Fortran. I don't think C allows that, right? C, it should always start from 0. So either you end up wasting those many elements of not using it, or you just switch to a local indexing. I think that was the, so you need to maintain 2 indices there.
Okay. Yes, sir, got it.
So I'll just add to that, because a similar thing has happened in our data clause with respect to what happens in C and what happens in Fortran. So I think Fortran supports this subarray, because of which you can have x colon y, where x and y could be arbitrary begin and end indices, whereas in case of C, you can specify a start index, but the syntax allows you to only write the length rather than the end index. So there is a difference with respect to that in the ACC pragmas also. Yeah, with respect to this specifically subarray, because it came up, I thought that I just add that. Any other concerns, questions? Okay. Yeah.
If nobody has questions, I have a question to the students. So I'm just yeah. That's what my question is. Renu has just asked the same question. Okay. Yeah. So I just started grading the quiz too, and then it seems like, so this last question is nothing but the last question of the tutorial 9, isn't it? Using MPI all to calculate the derivatives, isn't it? Did it not strike to, well, to, I don't know if to anybody, because I haven't finished grading yet. See, I mean, I just asked calculate, the derivatives in x and y directions, and then don't use a special algorithm like parallel cyclic reduction or recursive doubling, but you are allowed to use, let's say, Thomas algorithm or LU decomposition or something like that, or Gaussian elimination. But the main focus is on how do we get this data rearranged, isn't it? For the d by dx and d by dy. I think a couple of students have written it that way, but I think nobody has used this MPI all and then rearrange the data and then calculate it. I was hoping that you will ask a question, in the exam or something like that. Anyway, does it either?
So you're trying to take the transpose of the whole domain using MPI all, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that works if P is equal to N.
Yes.
Otherwise, if P is some other multiple of N, or if N is some other multiple of P, then this won't work the same way.
I said it is a multiple of N, right? I wrote it in the question.
No, N has to be equal to P for this to directly take the transpose.
Need not be. It can be even blocks, right? It could be, you can even send n by p data, right?
Okay, just a minute. I'll have to have a look at the code which you are using, because
Yeah.
I don't think you can directly take transpose of a whole matrix.
Yeah, it's not the direct transpose, it's any matrix. If you have a submatrix, all those matrices can be transposed. So basically, the block I will be sent to the block J depending on this thing. So it will work for even if you have submatrices. The only thing is that all of them should be n by p.
No, okay. So we divide it into smaller square matrices of size P, then take transpose of them and send it to according processes.
No. Smaller matrices of not size p. Smaller matrices of size n by p, right?
1 minute.
Yeah. Anyway, the focus was on.
MPI all to all will take transpose of matrices of size P cross P. I'm not entirely sure how to make it work for matrices of size some other multiple of P cross some other multiple of P. Could you provide your code in case you wrote it before?
Who says it works only for p by p?
I tried running it.
I don't think so. It will work for even if you have more than that, right? You just need to have a block.
Okay, so let's say you have 8 cross 8 matrix,
Yeah.
and you have 4 processes.
Yeah.
It's divided row wise. So the first 2 rows go to the process 0. Now, let's say you're trying to take the transpose of the whole domain. Within the memory allocated to the first process itself, you need to change A of 01 or swap A of 01 and A of 10. They are both in the memory of process 0 itself.
No, they are not. So essentially, you have A00. So you basically have a block, right? For example, you have 00 and 10. So the entire block will come here from the second processor. Right? It's actually not. So you are thinking transpose in a sense of a matrix, but it will not be exact transpose. It will be a transpose in terms of the blocks.
Okay, I'll have to try coding it once and see how this works.
Yeah.
So what were you intending for us to do in the second part of the question, drawing the schematic? Is it like showing some butterfly communication sort of thing, or?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to show how that, let's say after transpose, how does the elements go into particular process? For example, you start with process 0. It has, let's say, the blocks arranged row-wise, and after you do the transformation, it would come out to be vertical, right? Because of the transformation. So essentially, you would get all the data you want from the other processes, and then you will be able to take a derivative in the y direction, essentially by using the same local data that you already have because of the transformation. That's what I said.
Okay, so got it.
Yeah. I mean, some kind of schematic so that you could display this thing. So whatever, let's say, adding on to whatever Venu's question. So essentially, so for the local data, you may have to just take a transpose if you wish, when you want to calculate the d by dy, right? But for others, it will come there, it will move there. I think that is probably the the power of MPI all to all. Basically, it is nothing but MPI probably all gather followed by all scatter or something like that, right? So that you would get this implementation. I think some students have written using gather and scatter and things like that. Yeah.
Any other concerns, questions? All right, so we'll stop here and we'll meet next week. Until then, have a good weekend. Stay safe. So, bye, everyone.
Thank you, sir.